Hi, everyone. Good morning and good evening. My name is Liette Lamonde. I'm the CEO of Bonjour Startup Montreal. And I want to thank you so much for joining us for this very special event, held with a 13-hour time difference. So for Montrealers, it's dinner time, and we appreciate your presence at this late hour. We've been working on this gathering for quite some time now with our partners from Seoul, particularly with our friends from Shinhan Financial Group, with whom my colleague Nawel have developed a partnership last year to foster relationships between Montreal's startup ecosystem and Seoul's startup hub, Shinhan Square Bridge. We are also extremely happy to work with the Quebec government office in Seoul because they made this partnership possible, and they were of great help in the making of today's event. We hope to plant the seeds for international collaborations, and we love to encourage Montreal's entrepreneurs to go global and discover other ecosystems. And so we're glad for this opportunity to present Montreal's ecosystem to our partners from Seoul and to learn more about your own startup community. I hope that the next 2 hours will lead to successful collaborations between us. So thanks for being here and have a wonderful event.
Thank you very much, Liette. Good evening, bonjour, annyeonghaseyo for our Korean friends. This is as much as I can go speaking your language. Very sorry about that. So we'll do the webinar in English. So I would like to introduce myself. I'm Alexandra Meyer. I'm a head of communications at Bonjour Startup Montreal, and I will be your MC tonight. So as Liette said, we have a really interesting lineup tonight. We have 14 speakers from various industries and organizations, governmental and diplomatic bodies, corporations, as well as civil society. And we hope that this event will give you a very good overview of both ecosystems. So we have reserved a question period at the end of the event. So if you have any questions for our panelists, please feel free to write them in the chat so that we can address them at the end of our event. I would like now to welcome the Consul General of Korea in Montreal, Mr. Sang-do Kim, who has accepted to share a few words with us. So Mr. Consul General, if you would like to speak with us and turn on your camera.
Madam Liette Lamonde and distinguished participants, good morning and good evening. Firstly, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the organizers for inviting me to this meaningful event, which has been excellently arranged. My thanks also goes out to Madame Genevieve Holland for her tremendous effort to promote Korea-Quebec cooperation. I congratulate Shinhan Square Bridge Incheon and Bonjour Startup Montreal for the fruitful result of their collaboration, despite the difficult situation surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic. Considering that both companies are two of the leading startup supporting organization to deliver my remarks with a backdrop of the 30th anniversary of the opening of the Quebec government office in Seoul. For the last 3 decades, Korea-Quebec economic cooperation has developed robustly. In this regard, I am happy to note that the Korea-Quebec trade volume in 2020 was 2.69 billion Canadian dollars. Almost the same volume as in 2019, despite the economic shock from the pandemic. However, we have much to develop for even greater mutually beneficial cooperation between Korea and Quebec, and we can get there through the innovation and R&D sectors. Both Korea and Quebec are leaders in the innovation and R&D. Korea spends approximately 4.8% of its GDP in innovation and R&D, a world-leading number. And Quebec invests approximately 2.21% of GDP on R&D, making the province the leader of innovation in Canada. The fact that Korea and Quebec are leading players in innovation demonstrates why Korea and Quebec are natural partners in innovation. I would like to further highlight that such leadership in the innovation and R&D sectors has laid strong grounds for advanced cooperation between Korea and Quebec. Aeronautics and ICT are the most exemplary cases in that sense. For example, air operators in Korea are trained by simulators made by Montreal-based CAE, and airplanes made by Bombardier are well operated in Korea. There are also the cases of Samsung AI Labs partnership with MILA and Netmarble's partnership with Ludia, all of which are exemplary achievements. Distinguished participants, the COVID-19 pandemic, climate change, and other global crises are sending us an important lesson. That our trade and cooperation should be accordingly. I expect that the collaboration between pave the way for a more future-oriented and advanced economic cooperation between Korea and Quebec, and that this event will mark the debut of that purpose. My best wishes for a successful event. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Consul General. So with these opening words, I would like now to, for all of us to discover what makes Korea, and more particularly Seoul, such an attractive ecosystem for innovation. So we have three very interesting panelists now that I would like to introduce to you, starting first with Mr. Andrew Lim, who is Research and Innovation Attaché of the Quebec Government Office in Seoul. So Andrew, I hand it over to you.
All right, thank you for the introduction. Yes, as she mentioned, my name is Andrew Lim. I work for the Quebec government here in Seoul as a research and innovation attaché. So without further ado, I will share my presentation and I'll talk about the Korean ecosystem here. Okay, so my title is Dive into Montreal and Seoul Startup Ecosystem in Korea. So these are a table of contents. I'll talk about Korea and Quebec briefly, and then I'll talk about the Korea startup scene and some of the programs that startups in Montreal could enjoy for a soft landing in Korea, as well as some of the R&D programs that I'm currently conducting. So I'll do very quick introduction about Korea. The population is 51.7 million. Compared to Canada, for example, there's around 37 million, and capital is Seoul. I'm sure most people know. The area, it's quite interesting to mention because Korea, the physical geographical area is 100,210 square kilometers, where compared to Canada and Quebec, it's actually much smaller. Interestingly, there's around 28,000 Canadians in Korea. This was actually before Corona. Hopefully, it hasn't gone down too much, and the official language in Korea is Korean, obviously, although English is somewhat widely used, especially for international business. Also, Koreans known for many other things. I'm sure you guys probably heard, Squid Games. Korea is also known for esports. Samsung has their own Samsung White esports team. It's a LOL team, League of Legends. Korea is also known for many other things, BTS, and I'm sure you guys heard of the drama Goblin, or in Korean it's called Dokkaebi because it was filmed in Quebec. Korea is also known for other things like Gangnam Style, creative industries, and also food.
Excuse me
And
very much, Andrew.
yes.
Would you mind just making a full presentation? Because we can see the next slide. So I think we'll be better able to view your slide if you put it in full view.
Okay, I thought it was in.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure. Maybe it doesn't.
Okay, let me
like that.
quickly, hold on a second.
Mm-hmm. No problem. Take your time.
Is this a full view now or?
Yes, this is
Okay.
absolutely perfect. Thank you. Sorry for interrupting you.
That's fine. Thank you for letting me know. So
Okay.
apologies for the technical difficulties. So now back to Korea basic statistics. Here's some reasons why Korea is a very good place to do business. GDP in 2020, based on the World Bank, it's 10th now, 1.8 trillion US dollars. Trade volumes 9th. One of the key things you guys probably know, ICT adoption, which was based on the World Economic Forum, the Global Competitiveness Report, states that Korea is #1 in ICT adoption, things like 5G, broadband cable, smartphone penetration, etc. Also, Korea is well known for doing ease of doing business. The World Bank figures state that it's 5th. Ease of doing business, it means things like how long it takes to actually start up a business, etc., etc. Also, very interestingly, Korea is known for being a very innovative country, which you could see here. Yes, Korea is well known for its world-class innovation. You guys probably heard of the Bloomberg Innovation Index. Korea has ranked first, usually consistently first or second. And also Korea is well known for their patents. So on the right, it's the World International Patent Organization mentioned that Korea is 5th in terms of actual patents being produced. And I'll just give you a very quick overview of Korea-Quebec relations. Although the Consul General actually mentioned this, there's a lot of trade going on between Korea and Quebec. He mentioned $2 billion Canadian in 2020 as well. So there's still a lot of trade going on. Also, there's a lot of Korean investment in Quebec and Canada. You could just quickly look at the figures. I mean, there's a lot of need and demand for this kind of trade. And just to give you a background of the Korean presence in Quebec, there's quite a lot. You probably heard of a lot of these companies like Samsung. They invested in companies like AdGear in Montreal. There's also a Samsung Research Lab in Montreal, which a colleague of mine, Eric, will probably talk about more. Of course, there's the big two conglomerates, Kia and Hyundai. They're also present in Quebec. Just recently, Netmarble, a gaming company in Korea, they partnered with Kabam and Ludia to produce games as well. So there's quite a lot of Korean presence in Quebec. And conversely, there's a lot of Quebec presence in Korea as well. Quite innovative companies, actually. I'm not going to mention all of them, but for example, CAE, they're an airplane simulation company, WSP, an engineering company, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of, surprisingly, a lot of trade and collaboration between the two nations. Okay, I'll quickly talk about the startup scene. So why startups flock to Korea? There's been a lot of investment. There's a lot of trade. Like for example, Samsung acquires Canadian startups. There's 48-hour discovery. So there has been a lot of not just international, but Canadian startups coming to Korea because there's a lot of opportunities and et cetera. So to be more specific, why do startups come to Korea? Obviously, major conglomerates. I'll talk about it a bit more in detail, but a lot of the conglomerates like Samsung, LG, they have their own venture capital kind of departments or divisions that actually partner up a lot with startups and a lot of the innovation companies, not just to invest, but also do business together. As I already mentioned, there's world-class ICT infrastructure. I mean, Korea is one of the fastest internet in the world. I think just today I heard it's around 10 to 11 times faster than the US. Koreans are also known to be early adopters. So Korea is a very good place to kind of validate and test out your services or products. Also, there's strong government support, which I'll talk about a little bit more in detail later. But basically, the government has a lot of initiatives and provides a lot of budget for innovation or R&D or startups. Also, Korea is known to be the gateway to Asia. Yes, there's other powerhouses in Asia, such as China and Japan, but Korea is known to be kind of, you start here first and then expand there as well. Also because of the language, because English is somewhat, I would imagine, used a bit more than some of the other Asian countries. And also the Korean market potential. As I mentioned, Korea has a big population as well. They're early adopters. They do a lot of ICT, so it's a good place to do business here. And also, just to give you a brief background, there's something called a K brand. You probably heard of it, like K quarantine, K pop, K movies. The government, you can see in the picture here, President Moon himself, he takes this brand and kind of goes internationally. So one of the good ways to kind of take advantage of this is come to Korea and kind of enjoy this branding that the government does themselves. And also, there's like YouTube academies. So it's very innovative here, so to say. I'll give you a snapshot of the Korean startup trends and sectors. On the right, I'm not going to go through all of them, but these are the priority sectors that the government has put in place for startups, R&D, and innovation. And a lot of them actually it coincides with what the Quebec government has done or prioritized, such as AI, big data, cloud computing, etc. Some quick figures, total early stage funding, 3 billion Canadian dollars in Korea, median series A round, 3.8 million, et cetera, et cetera. I think startups are quite interested in these kind of figures, so you could take a look at that. What's interesting is median seed round, $500,000 Canadian, which is actually quite a lot compared to some of the other countries. So, okay, so this is just a very quick snapshot of Korean startups. There's actually a lot more, but I'm just wanting to give you kind of a snapshot on some of the startups in Korea. Some famous ones, not everybody, but some of you might have heard of Coupang. It's an e-commerce company that started not too long ago, maybe about 5 years ago. They did an IPO on NASDAQ, I think about a year ago. It was hugely successful. So there's a lot of investment going on for startups. And this is another snapshot of the Korean startup ecosystem, actually. You can see on the right, I'm not going to go through all of them, but like Montreal, Korea does have a startup ecosystem, accelerators, the incubators, the corporate VCs, et cetera. And the key here is there's a lot of these guys work together to provide programs for international startups, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But yes, there's quite a lot of international programs for international startups, which include, lectures in English, for example. What's very interesting is what we call it is CCEI, or to be more specific, Census for Creative Economy Innovation. So this is kind of a top-down approach or more of a government support approach. What they do is they divided up the geographical regions of Korea and partner up some of these, physical accelerators and incubators. They actually built them and they partner up with a lot of the conglomerates and kind of divided up their fields. So for example, obviously Hyundai, they would do vehicles, Samsung would do semiconductors, LG would do electronics, AI, etc. So they wanted to really have this support from conglomerates for the expertise, but also the government support and budget, etc. So this was a very interesting way for the Korea to kind of initiate this. And this started around 2015. So it's quite well established there. Yes, I won't go this too much, but these are just some of the big, deals that were made in Korea. As I mentioned, there's Coupang. There's another company called Market Curly. They do a lot of fresh goods, etc. So I won't go through them too much, but what I wanted to emphasize here is on the right, you can see in the graph, number of startups, it's skyrocketed. Obviously from 2020, 20 years is a long time, but you could see there's over 100,000 startups because there's a lot of opportunities, investments, and businesses going on. So I guess I won't do this too much, but the key here is the numbers have been going up ever since, this table is tabulated. You could see a lot of amounts in terms of investment, a lot of early stage companies, startups. So the trend is just growing exponentially. Same thing here, startup invest by industry. I just want to show you kind of the industrial investments that's been going on. Obviously, ICT dominates, obviously, but as you can see, biotechnology has gone up quite a lot too. I would imagine because of Corona, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of opportunity. There's also games as well. And these are some sample VCs in Korea. I probably mentioned some of these. As I said, a lot of the conglomerates have their own investment arm, I guess you call them, and we do a lot of B2Bs with them to try to have them, see the benefits of Quebec technology and startups. You probably heard of some other ones like SoftBank. I mean, most people know SoftBank. It's based in Japan. We have SoftBank Ventures Korea as well. They're based here, and also they do a lot of programs and B2B meetings, et cetera, et cetera. Surprisingly, Korean investment partners, they are the biggest investors in startups. I mean, they're kind of I guess you call it a private-public partnership. So they do a lot of investments as well. And Smilegate, they do a lot of investments in gaming, for example. So this is just a snapshot. There's a lot of money going around, so to say. So, okay, so I'll talk about some of the soft landing in Korea, some of the R&D programs that I'm also collaborating on. She'll probably talk about this, but there's a Montreal accelerator called La Piscine. They actually recently had an agreement with Yangjae AI Hub Accelerator. Yangjae AI Hub is an accelerator based in Korea. They're under the Seoul Metropolitan Government, and Seoul kind of gave them the initiative budget to kind of have 80 companies initially, and also attract AI companies from around the world. So I mean, La Piscine will talk about this, so I won't talk about this too much, but there's one program there. There's another program Shinhan Square Bridge is actually doing. I won't talk about it too much because my colleague Julia will probably talk about this, but here's another program open for international targets. So if you are interested, please let me know, because it's open to startups in Montreal, and they could apply and come to Korea and enjoy all the benefits that we have to offer. Here's some other programs that we're doing. I won't go through them too much, but basically there's a lot of programs specific for international startups, such as ones in Montreal, that come here, go through other programs, meet with the venture capitalists, do the pitch and all those great stuff. So we do a lot of these things, yes. And a lot of these programs, for example, are under the Seoul Metropolitan Government.
Andrew, I'm really sorry to interrupt, but okay. I don't know how many slides you have left, but we are a little bit behind. So if you can wrap it up.
Sure, I'll wrap it up. So yes, thank you so much. Here's just another program. Just to give you background, Canadian startups has already went through this cohort. So you could see at the bottom, there's actually been several Canadian startups that were selected, received the money, they came to Korea and enjoyed all the benefits. And as I mentioned, 48-hour Discovery, for example, they did a partnership recently with a Korean company to receive funds and keep going. So they're a drug discovery company, like their name indicates. Here are some other programs and research program. I guess because of time, I won't go with them too much. We do have we have an actual program with Quebec and Korea where people could apply and get funding, but I guess because of time, I'll go through them. Here's another R&D program that's open for startups as well. If you're in advanced materials, you can apply and get the risk going. The Korean entity is the Natural Research Foundation of Korea, and the Quebec one's Prima Quebec, which some of you may have heard of. So I think I'm almost done. And we do have a lot of trade missions to Korea. Unfortunately, we do it online a lot these days, but offline, usually we have people come here and we have a program to meet with other companies, VCs, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of opportunities to be had here, and that's it. So thank you so much for the time. Yes, I will now close this and yes. Okay, thank you for the time. As I mentioned, there's a lot of opportunities for startups and companies in Quebec to enjoy all the benefits here. So please let us know and give us a call.
Thank you very much, Andrew. It's so interesting. I'm really sorry to have rushed you, but unfortunately, fortunately, we have a great program, but it means that we have less time for each speaker. So my apologies. And I would like now to pass it over to Miss Julia Lee, who is the CEO of Media U Corp. Julia?
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. Very nice to meet you all. I'm Julia Lee, and I will share presentation material. Okay. First, I would like to thank you, Bonjour, Startup Montreal and Quebec government officials for providing precious event today. I hope that this opportunity will enhance our understanding of each other's startup ecosystem and lead to a productive cooperation in the future. Today, I'm going to introduce Shinhan Skill Bridge Incheon, which I'm in full charge of the entire program. Shinhan Skill Bridge Incheon is powered by Shinhan Financial Group, a leading Korean finance company providing a full range of consumer and commerce financial services. And the facility and the program is operated by MediaU, a startup business accelerator. And we provide office space, mentor networking, and connection to investors like VCs. And Shinhan Skill Bridge Incheon is located not Seoul, in Songdo district, Incheon city, the first city you meet when visiting Korea. Shinhan Skill Bridge Incheon is actually the part of a startup park project initiated by the Ministry of SMEs and Startups. Actually, as Andrew mentioned, the role of government is very important in understanding Korea's startup ecosystem, and government supports various areas from incubation programs to venture invest money support. So SkillBridge Incheon is also a collaborative startup support program backed by various parts, government side like Ministry of SMEs and Startups and Incheon Metropolitan City, and Korean enterprises like Shinhan Finance Group and bio company Celtrion, and also startup ecosystem players like MediaU and other accelerator companies and VCs. Now I will talk about our programs. We have basically 3 different programs, incubation and accelerating and global. And our goal is to provide a whole range of support program that make the startups dream of being unicorn come true. Incubation program supports, early stage startups, and we provide office space and supports mentoring and necessary networking in order to help startups to grow to the next level. Then we have accelerating program for startups in scale-up stage. And we support the startups at this stage with essential marketing solutions and investment links. And we also have a dedicated fund from Shinhan Finance Group so we have an investment function here, but also we introduce investment linkage for startups outside. So, along with the incubation and acceleration, we are also putting a lot of our effort into global programs. We are closely working with the global accelerators to cooperate our global accelerating programs. And we are focusing on the market entry strategies and the networking to discover partners in the local market. And I'm sure for those of you who are listening to webinars in Montreal, the field of interest would be a global program. So in addition to programs that help domestic startups to expand to overseas market, we also have inbound programs for overseas startups who wants to set up business here in Korea. Actually, we start the first inbound program next month in November. So maybe next time I would like to have Montreal startups in our inbound program. Actually, we started running the program at the end of last year and have a great result accumulated. We have more than 100 startups in our portfolio membership, and not only our investment through dedicated funds, but also through investment linkage. The startups we support have received 5.3 billion US dollar investment overall since the membership started last year. There are also about 200 networking partners that are with us. I will talk about this later. And today's presentation is in the virtual space, but I hope you will visit our space next time. Actually, we have the space of 5,000 square meters and provide office spaces for startups and meeting rooms and other conveniences. And this slide shows our partners. I think networking is the most important thing in fostering startups because we cannot provide all things that the startup needed. So I believe that ScaleBridge Incheon has achieved a lot in a short time period thanks to its good partnerships. And earlier this year, ScaleBridge Incheon also partnered with Google for Startups to run a Smart City Accelerating Program together. We will continue to strive to grow into a global hub that links bridge to Korea, gateway to the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julia. This was very interesting, and I hope that soon we can make this, as you say, a real meeting and not a virtual meeting. I look very much forward to looking at your space, which looks just formidable. So it's a wonderful project. Thank you so much, Julia.
Thank you.
Thank you. So for this final, this is the final segment. I invite Mr. Eric Shim, who is a Global Enterprise Product Marketing Manager, at Samsung Electronics. So I'll hand it over to you, Eric.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me? All right.
Yes, very well.
And I'll share my slide right now. Let's see. Oops. Can you see it?
Yes. Very
awesome. Well. All right. I think I have about 7 slides. I'll spend probably 1 minute each. Try not to go over time. Thanks to the organizations for arranging these meetings. I mean, it's my honor to be invited here and speak up at Samsung. It's a big company, so I hope to give you, quick overview of what we do and how we can actually support each other and going forward. So, quick introduction about myself. I was born in South Korea but raised in Calgary, Alberta. I went to school there and studied in computer science at the University of Waterloo, Ontario. And then after school, I started working at a company called Avanade. It's a joint venture between Microsoft and Accenture as an IT consultant. So I was doing a lot of projects in finance sectors like mortgage insurance companies, retail bankings, investment bankings, in Toronto, Vancouver, and New York. Then I pursued an MBA degree at a school called INSEAD and had a privilege of studying at both of their campuses in France and Singapore. For about almost 9 years after the school, I was working at a Samsung Electronics global headquarters in Suwon, which is about 40 minutes south of Seoul, our capital city, as various roles. So I served as product managers for various products, as well as I also developed a lot of strategy implementations for our enterprise businesses. And sometimes I also, as a Korean Canadian, I worked as a kind of front man when it comes to VIP visitors from our key partners and customers. Also, there are a lot of overseas business trips to meet with the partners and customers to present Samsung's global strategies and offerings. So quite a unique experience so far, and I hope I can give you a quick intro to first of all, maybe the mobility market. I know it's probably may not be so relevant to some of you, but I think if you are planning on developing applications, mobile applications or whatnot, or building some solutions using the mobile devices, I think this may be relevant to you. So as you know, everybody has a smartphone, hopefully, right now, and it's been growing in terms of the market size every year, ever since I think the first Galaxy or first iPhone came out. And for the past decades, we've been growing in every year. What you see on the left-hand side is the market of the mobile markets. And you can see that it's been growing every year except for 2020, which was actually hit by the COVID-19, unfortunately. But then we quickly recovered up, and we are projecting to increase again in next years to come. But interesting figure here is that the bottom part is what you see is 61% is the consumer devices. So what we call, like, everybody has a smartphone, right? But the top two parts are the enterprise market. And as you can see, the enterprise market is growing every year, whereas consumer market is pretty much stagnant. So which means enterprise devices are actually driving the growth of this mobile market right now. And these are the company-owned devices, like smartphones, the tablet that they give out to their customers, or individuals bringing their own device to the work purposes, so BYOD devices. So Samsung, as a consumer or traditional consumer electronics company, we also started investing into enterprise mobility market for about 10 years, and I had a privilege of joining the team early stage to shape the whole overall stage here. What you see on the right-hand side is the vendor market share. It's a very interesting years for the past few years. Samsung has been the global number one in terms of the delivering smartphones, tablets, wearables, and whatnot, all the mobile devices in terms of the numbers. Our main competitors, as you may know, is Apple. Apple's been delivering iPhones back in 2009, and I think they just launched a new iPhone recently as well. But in terms of the number of the shipments right now, Samsung is slightly higher because we are bigger in the other parts of the world other than the North America in terms of the competitors. Another key interesting thing happened was the Huawei. So for up to 2019, Huawei has been a very big in terms of they're investing a lot in the mobile market. They're traditionally 5G and IT solutions companies, but then they try to go into a mobility market. So in 2019, they actually flipped Apple to become a number 2 in terms of market share in the market. But in 2020 and also the COVID time, Huawei was actually hit by many government block, including U.S. governments, not Canadian, I think many other different Western countries has blocked Huawei for different types of allegations on backdoors to Chinese governments and so on. So their market share dropped significantly for the past 2 years, and as you can see, it's now even lower than Lenovo, maybe slightly higher than Microsoft, but you can see that there is an impact on government's policies and to this kind of tech giants in the mobile spaces. So this is quite interesting for everybody to share. So enterprises is another key market. We're doing about 20% of our revenue coming from the enterprise market right now. Hopefully it will go up to 30% in years to come. But what we offer in the enterprises for the B2B customers are as you can see here is our Galaxy Enterprise Edition, which is my major product right now. It's so we have Galaxy S21 and Galaxy S21 Enterprise Edition, same software and hardware, but then more robust security and lifecycle support on the Enterprise Edition devices. So this is another device that the companies are adopting, especially in the European region right now. We also have devices like Galaxy Tab Active and X-Cover series, like rugged devices for front end, the full force people, or logistics, or retails, or healthcare, even for sanitization. So we have those kind of rugged devices for your use cases. If you guys have outdoor use cases. Not just the devices, but we also have solutions. So Samsung Knox is our security solutions and a manageability solution. So you can, unlike iPhones or iPads, you can actually customize Samsung devices as you like. You can even change your logo of the booting logo. You can change everything that's in the device, because it's an open the open platform with an Android. So it's a very flexible. So that's another key factor that you can consider putting into your offerings. So ecosystem partner programs. So I think the first I have to mention there are 3 different types of programs that I can recommend. First one is obviously where my team is in, the Samsung Knox partner program. It's a partner program for the B2B customers or B2B partners, so channels. So any independent solution vendors or even system integrators can sign up as a partner within the partner program and get support with us, and then also joint go-to-market strategy together. We also have Samsung Mobile Accessory Partner Program, what we call SMAP. You may have seen some accessories out there that has this design for Samsung logo on it. So these are our strategic partners that we certify them and give them early access to the product designs so that they can actually go to market earlier than their competitors together with us. So if you are thinking about building cases or accessories around the Samsung ecosystem, then definitely this is another program that you may want to consider. As for the individual developers or corporate developers, we have a developers community, and everybody has access to the SDKs on our devices, whatnot. We also run the annual Samsung Developers Conference, been running for about 5 years now in San Francisco. This year unfortunately was actually virtual, but hopefully you have attended, or if you have not, please check them out. They have quite a good keynote speakers and hands-on the sessions there. So fully leverage this opportunity here. In terms of collaboration opportunities with Samsung, I think Andrew earlier mentioned about Samsung Venture VC. This is a little bit bigger investment arm in terms of from the Samsung's perspective, but a little bit more smaller scale. Here is the Samsung Next. Samsung Next is another open innovation organizations that we are running globally. We have presence in Toronto, New York, and Tel Aviv, and many other parts of the world. And they basically do startup investment, smaller than the Samsung Ventures, but very agile. We also work with the startups to just kind of either invest or help them drive the business with Samsung's global division. So I think if you can reach out to Samsung Next to pitch your ideas, that will be another great opportunity to get into Samsung ecosystem. I'll talk about Samsung C-Lab a little bit later. Samsung Research, as Andrew mentioned, we have 14 global research centers where we study the technologies 5 years or 10 years later. And we have research centers in Toronto and Montreal, AI centers. So so topics like AI, security, data, intelligence, robots, and so on. So if you have innovative solutions that you can integrate with Samsung's ecosystem, that's another organizations that you can work together with. Lastly, the Samsung C Lab, what we call Creative Lab, is a internal startup organization that we have in Samsung Korea headquarters here. So every year, Samsung encourages our employees to create a team and then do a pitch to the judges. And then once they actually win it, they can actually start up their own in-house spin-offs from Samsung headquarters. And then if that becomes bigger, then they can actually become the external company as well. But we also have something called Samsung C Lab Outside. So what it is it's like a Shinan's score bridge. It's like a support program for external startups. So every year we recruit about 10 to 12 different startups in Korea. So you have to be registered as a Korean business in Korea if you want to participate in this program. But we give them a 1 year of the office space just south of our Seoul. There's a big office space that you can actually leverage. We also provide up to $100,000 of the investment for each of the startups if it makes sense. We also have acceleration program, exhibition support to our Samsung employees or outside external, and they also have a demo days for startups to pitch their ideas and presents to different type of audiences. So areas of recruitment for this program is AI, AR, IoT, all the audio, videos, and so on, wearables, and even 5G is another key. Blockchain was another key areas that we recently started to recruiting. So we recruit every year. So if you ever come to expand to Korea, make sure to consider this C Lab Outside program with the Samsung. It's a great opportunity. I'll finish with quick tips for working with Samsung based on my experience with startups in Samsung's here. There's some do's and don'ts. I think, for do's, please do reach out to Samsung Connections to pitch your ideas, whether they are in HQ or in Canadian arms or wherever. So you fully leverage that connections, and I'll be happy to talk to you if you guys have great ideas with your solutions. And also, please think about think from a Samsung's business perspective, like how your solutions or applications or whatever offerings can support Samsung's business, because that's most of the things that we evaluate when we actually work with the startups, like how they can actually support us to create more values with our Samsung Galaxy devices or our ecosystem. And this is a little bit of a cultural stuff, but please respect the organization hierarchy. Korean company is quite hierarchical than other Western companies. So executives do make the decisions, working levels do build the business case for you. So they are your internal salesmen. So make sure to build that working level relationships first, even before reaching out to the executives in the HQ. What some mistakes that I've seen with startups in the past is some startups just came directly to Samsung headquarters saying, hey, we will have a great ideas, let's collaborate together, without the proven record of their business in their local regions. So, and most of the times we reject the ideas, or we politely reject it because it's not at the scale of Samsung's businesses most of the time. So please make sure to work with the Canadian organization. We have a Samsung Canada in Mississauga in Ontario. So please make sure you build your business cases together with them, and maybe with our American arms in New Jersey as well. And then once you have a proven record, then we can bring it to the global level in HQ. And never underestimate the power of human relationships, because you do work with the people here, and internal salesmen for your working levels are great, very important. So I think I'll stop here. I think and my time almost done. So thank you for your attention here, and thanks to the organization for organizing this.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you very much. So yeah, really sorry. We have such a great program here, but I know it's sometimes frustrating because you just want to get into more details. Please know also that we should be able to share all presentations with all the participants in a follow-up email. So that should help as well. So thank you very much. This was very insightful. I hope this was inspiring also for our people from the Montreal and Quebec side. So now I'm very happy also to be able to introduce you to Montreal's ecosystem and the Quebec ecosystem. So we have 3 presenters here as well. Let's start with the first, please, Mr. Emmanuel Pinochet, who is International Affairs Advisor at the Quebec Ministry of Economy and Innovation. Emmanuel.
Thank you, Alexandra, for the introduction. Thank you for having me. I am delighted to be here with you all today. So I will start the presentation right away by sharing my screen. Allow me a second, please. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes, very well.
Yes, wonderful. So the idea of this presentation is to provide some context, broad information about Quebec, and maybe set a few economic and political landmarks for our Korean partner listening today. So before heading to the heart of the matter, I would like to present in a glimpse our organization. So I work for the Canadian and International Innovation Partnership Direction at the Ministry of Economy and Innovation. And our mandate is to foster international collaboration in the field of science and technology by helping organizations, mainly startups, incubator and research center, to find opportunities of partnerships or resources available for them to leverage their innovation capacity. The support is provided in 2 different ways. First, by doing counseling, providing information, and then by organizing networking activities such as this one. So we work with the Quebec foreign offices abroad, foreign governments, incubator and accelerator, clusters, research center and universities, technology transfer centers, Investissement Québec, and foreign governments, as I said earlier. So let's dive in. A few metrics about the province of Quebec. The population is 8.5 million people. The mother tongue in Quebec is French. The metropole of the province of Quebec is Montreal with 4 million people, almost half of the population of the province. This is also where you find the highest concentration of tech jobs in Canada. Mainly Quebec and Ontario provinces have 75% of tech jobs of this country. The unemployment rate in Quebec is very low. The labor market is very dynamic for years now. For some, it is a great thing, especially if you're looking for work. If you are working for employees, it may be a challenge. So talking about challenges, Quebec have high-level socioeconomic challenges. Most of them, I would call them structural and long-term challenges. So this is not something that is going away within a few months or within a few years. This is going to stay for a long time. So we have first an aging society, such as Japan. Quebec is getting older, and it is becoming not a problem, but a challenge. Decarbonizing the economy, also the digital transformation, and of course, globalization, economic integration. I'll talk a little bit about trade here. So Quebec and Canada in general is what we call a small open economy. This means that basically the inside market is small, and we're looking abroad through trade agreements to sell product and services and grow the economy. We have 14 trade agreements with over 51 countries in the world. Our main trading partners are the United States, Germany, Mexico, China, Japan, France, and South Korea comes in the 10th place. One of the challenges we have is that most of the trade is done with the United States and the agreement we have also with Mexico. And we're trying to diversify this and have more relations with Europe and the Asia Pacific. There's a list of products that we export and import here, mainly aircraft, aluminum, iron, pork products, paper and wool and wood. Pharmaceutical products, mid-size trucks. We import aircraft parts, pharmaceutical products, oil, car, and computers. Strategic economic sectors. There's more than 3 strategic economic sectors in Quebec, but those are probably those that are more, let's say, knowledge and tech intensive industries. The first one is aerospace. Montreal is the 3rd aerospace center in the world after Toulouse in France and after Seattle, where the company Boeing is. So you'll find in Montreal companies like Bombardier, Mitsubishi, Airbus, Bell Helicopter, Textron, CAE, Pratt & Whitney. Also, Montreal is known for video game. Montreal is ranked 5th for video games in the world. It is a great place to have an animation studio, and you'll find companies like Ubisoft. Finally, Montreal is also very known for artificial intelligence. This is where you find the largest concentration of AI researchers in the world, and deep learning researchers in particular. So you'll find companies like Google, IBM, Microsoft, DeepMind, Facebook in Quebec. Now we'll talk a little bit more about growing strategic economic sectors. So those are at this point more early stage industries. There's a lot of investment though that has been made, a lot of R&D pilot project, and this is becoming important. It's growing fast, and eventually it will probably become strategic sector like the one I just talked about earlier. So what is important now is the EV battery, from critical strategic minerals to recycling, AI and quantum technology, and also hydrogen, especially hydrogen from electrolysis of water. I'll talk a little bit about the Quebec and the South Korea relationship now. So many agreements have been signed, most of them by the government. So in a way, the government set the playing field over the past few years. We have an agreement, we have a free trade agreement between Canada and South Korea that was signed in 2015. It was followed by a science, technology, and innovation agreement in 2017. There's bilateral cooperation between South Korea and Quebec. There's call for projects every year that finance initiatives. There's a federal program also that allows startups to collaborate with foreign entities. Following this, you can see also civil society getting involved and finding opportunities abroad, such as clusters, research centers, and startup. I think my colleague from the Seoul office talked about it earlier, but Prima Quebec signed an agreement with the National Research Foundation of Korea in 2020. We have the aerospace cluster, KRIAC, that signed an agreement with Kai-Tech. Mila in the intelligence or in the artificial intelligence hub also signed an agreement with ETRI, and this is growing, and now we are seeing startup ecosystem partners signing agreements with Korean partners. So all this is very, very positive, and we can see momentum building up over time. Talking about momentum, this is some of the startups that are scouting or are currently active in the South Korean market. A lot of them have battery technology. They are involved in material science, very high-tech companies in AI and such a field. There is also research and innovation partnerships through bilateral projects. And you can see here more the academia working along with SMEs and building project in, let's say, hydrogens, rare earth elements, biomaterial for neurosurgical application, etc. So this is all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. I will gladly answer those questions whenever you ask them. So please feel free to reach out, and I thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. This was really very interesting. So now let's hear it from Samuel Bertillon, please, who is a project director, Asia and Pacific region at Montreal International. So he will present to you more in detail the Montreal benefits. You might want to also open your camera, Samuel. Right.
Good evening, good morning. Sorry, I think you're seeing one or two of my screens at the moment.
Right now we see two, so if you put it, just change the form.
All right.
Yeah, now it's perfect.
All right. It's a pleasure to be with you today, everyone. I'm Samuel. I'm project director at Montreal International. I represent the Economic Promotion Agency for the City of Montreal, and I'm here tonight and this morning to present some of the key facts and figures about why Montreal can be relevant for a Korean startup to operate, to come in and to set up here and grow its operations globally. But first of all, I'd like to say a few words on the organization I represent. Montreal International is a public-private partnership. We represent, like I said, the Greater Montreal region. So that's a regroupment of 82 municipalities. And we represent the three levels of government and more than 190 private partners that believe in our mission. So it's a exciting organization because we represent a very dynamic economic region, but also many private sectors that believe in our mission and that give us money to make sure that we represent the city on the global stage. And what we do as an organization is basically we have four mandates. We attract foreign direct investment. We want to bring international entrepreneurs here. We want to help international workers and students come here, and we want them to stay once they graduate, or if they have problems finding a job after their work permit is finished. And finally, we want to help, we want to attract more and more international organizations, whether it's UN agencies or such organizations who want to make Montreal relevant in the forums of the world. And Montreal is relevant if you're operating a startup because of the highest concentration of tech jobs that we have here. It was mentioned earlier in another presentation, but if we look at Montreal in the context of Canada, it has the highest concentration of tech jobs, and it has the fifth in the context of North America if we take the 20th largest metropolitan cities. So it really is at the core of the talent pool that we have here, and it can make sense for a Korean startup to come here to operate because we have a lot of expertise in the field of information technologies. Another key asset of the region that maybe not everyone is aware of, especially in Korea, is the fact that the city of Montreal, or the Greater Montreal region, is an excellent student city, one of the best in the Americas, but it's considered as well as Canada's university capital because we have 11 university institutions and 60 colleges, and that makes a total of over 320,000 post-secondary students. So it's a city very dynamic because of these universities, and it makes for a lot of opportunities in terms of partnerships for universities like University of Montreal, McGill University, Concordia, etc., that are recognized around the world. But it's also a city where students like to live, and they want to stay here once they graduate. So it can be key for an employer to be part of that ecosystem. Another important factor is the fact that Montreal is the most bilingual and trilingual, or as the most bilingual and trilingual population in Canada. That makes the city extremely popular for tourism, but not only for business purposes. It's an asset to have people who can speak many languages. And due to the French heritage that we have here, it makes us a gateway in between Europe and North America. And it can make sense to have an operation site here to cover not only North America or Canada, but also to have an edge, or at the same time we can target Europe, some of the Francophone markets that we're very well connected with due to the historical heritage that we have. So if you're a startup in Korea, you might want to consider costs when it comes to deciding your next location, especially if you're going to North America. And an important aspect of our region is the fact that your US dollar that you're going to invest in Montreal will bring you much further here than in many other regions, especially if we compare the city with the biggest metropolitan areas in Canada and the US. We have a significant cost advantage, and it's in many sectors. So it's not only in the tech industry, it's in healthcare, it's in video game, it's in aerospace, manufacturing, financial services, and that can mean a lot in the long run. And it's not only the cost of operating a business, it's also the cost of living that is very interesting here. It is Montreal is famous for having affordable housing, low medical insurance costs, generous family allowances, affordable childcare. That can make a difference for an entrepreneur moving here, and especially if you want to hire people who want to have a decent quality of life. Well, Montreal is affordable not only for operating a business, but also for living. And finally, a few words on the quality of life. Well, we like to say that in Montreal, we have a very vibrant cultural metropolis. And we have many festivals here. We're proud Francophones in the context of North America. But that being said, it's not only about festivals that make the city very interesting. It's also safe. One of the lowest homicide rate among the 20 largest metropolitan areas in Canada and the US. And we have universal healthcare and very low education tuition fees. So as an entrepreneur, it can make sense to come here for the talent pool, for the connections you can make with the universities, and also with the quality of life that you can get. But what we're seeing, and this is my final slide, it's the fact that as an entrepreneur, we now have a very dynamic startup ecosystem. It's growing. There are VCs, there are incubators and accelerators, and I know that my colleague Ethan Song will say a few words on that particular aspect. But keep in mind that Montreal is relevant for entrepreneurs. And if you have any question, feel free to reach out. I'll be happy to answer any question you may have. And I'm going to stop my presentation right there.
Thank you very much, Samuel. This was very interesting. And yes, this is a perfect segue to introduce the final speaker of this segment, who is Ethan Song, and who is also an entrepreneur in residence at Bonjour Startup Montreal. So we are working closely with him together, so he can tell you a little bit more about the startup ecosystem from his own perspective. Ethan, I hand it over to you.
Hey, sounds good. Just it seems like my camera is locked.
Khadija, can you help us, please?
Oh, I'm good. Hi, everyone.
Perfect.
I'm gonna present my screen. All right, there it is. All right, guys. Really great to meet everyone, and good morning over there in Korea. I just want to say I'm not Korean, although my last name is Song, but I've been to Korea many times. I love the country. A little bit about myself. My name is Ethan. I'm a founder of, I would say, fairly well-known local startup called Frank & Oak. We started a company in 2012, and we're able to raise over $50 million in venture capital and grew the company to above 200 employees, and over that period, probably around 200 to $250 million in revenue. I benefited myself definitely from the local ecosystem. In short, my story is that I was actually born in China, and I went to school in Vancouver and did computer and electrical engineering in Vancouver. I worked for about a year at Deloitte in technology strategy, and then moved to Montreal, where basically I've been for the last 12 or 13 years of my life. And that's where I decided to start my company at the time. I'm also an angel investor and advisor to many Canadian startups. And currently I'm an entrepreneur in residence for Bonjour Startup. And I thought that, it would be useful to give a perspective of someone who has grown through the Montreal startup ecosystem and give you guys a bit of a personal perspective. Before I go into that, I want to share a little bit about Bonjour Startup Montreal itself. It's a not-for-profit that was founded in 2018. It's funded by the government and the city of Montreal and some private partners as well. But I think what's really great about the organization, it's really there to foster the ecosystem itself. And so it contributes in a variety of ways through many programs, content, as well as events. I myself am part of a program that's here to help scale up companies. So companies that have raised a Series A, let's say around $10 million, to get to the next level. And so I'm really focusing on supporting the local ecosystem. So talking a little bit about the ecosystem itself. Now, the one thing I should say is, having been in the ecosystem for more than 10 years, it's gone 100x in terms of like how dynamic and how big and how many players are there to help you as an entrepreneur in the ecosystem. And I'm showing you this slide, which is absolutely crazy because there are so many parties and it's hard for us to review all of these within the minute that I have. But to give you guys an idea, we have a strong base of investors, both at the seed, Series A, Series B, and further level. There are some large players that come from the public side that can invest. The Canadian banks are some of the most competitive banks in the local ecosystem in terms of working with startups, and a lot of them have also now their own VC firm. There's a great crop of accelerators, but there's also a lot of supporting organizations from like Montreal, Bonjour Montreal Startup, the one I'm part of. Now, one thing that's really interesting about the ecosystem is that it's not just a general technology or software hub. There are specific areas of concentration where there's been great success stories. One of them obviously is in artificial intelligence. You've probably heard about that from my peers previously, but organizations like Scale AI, Mila, and Ivado have all contributed through a variety of funding, accelerators, and different programs to the AI sector. Now, life science and industry as well, and robotics are two areas also that Montreal decided to specialize. And I come more from the commerce sector, but I really enjoy meeting entrepreneurs in some of these sectors I think are truly changing the world today. Now, in terms of accelerators, there are many accelerators. And so here there are just some examples for you to look at. We have quite a few accelerators that are either affiliated with venture capital investors, but some are also affiliated to universities. And there's a few of them that have definitely received global recognition for their innovative business model or the way that they approach helping companies to get started. From a funding perspective, I think in a previous presentation, we talked about numbers, which are starting to get very large, but 4 out of the 5 most active early stage investors in Canada are based here in Montreal. And, that's astounding. And I was actually benefited from that. Real Ventures here that's listed as an early stage investor was one of my early stage investors. They were actually able to participate in both of my pre-seed, seed, Series A. And, to be 100% honest, I'm not sure that, our company would have lasted or gone to the level that it has without the help of the partners at Real Ventures. We've also benefited from Investment Quebec, which is an investment firm that's related to the Quebec government, and they've also helped us. Ange Quebec is the largest investors network in Canada. It's actually entrepreneurs that pooled basically their capital and are helping a new generation of entrepreneurs to succeed. Lastly, Front Row Ventures, which is a new idea, but it's the first Canadian investment fund that's managed by students. And once again, the idea is that you're never too young. There's not any level of experience that's required to be an entrepreneur. And I definitely think that Montreal, with its openness, is pushing that forward. A few examples of companies that have been very successful in Montreal. Now, this is based on money raised. Money raised is definitely not the only measure of success, but we do pride ourselves on companies like Sonder, that's basically in the rental space, Hopper, which is an app for finding flights and booking hotels, or Alaya Care, which is in the health tech space. All these companies that we're quite proud of. Now, an interesting part about both our role as well as the ecosystem we want to build is really built around the idea of diversity. I think that I'm an immigrant myself. I came into this country. I came into Montreal, and I definitely felt welcome. But beyond just a culture of openness, there's also organizations that are there to support the diversity. QueerTech is a great example for the LGBTQ community in terms of providing more resources in this space. We also have a strong sense of making the startup environment more equal. And in that case, supporting female entrepreneurship, it's definitely not enough yet. We need to do a lot more. And I think the Montreal ecosystem has embraced that challenge. And I'm proud to say that I'm part of that. Now, Startup Fest is a great event. If you guys ever get to come to Montreal and, even just for the week of Startup Fest to discover what Montreal has to offer, it's a great event. It's been there for, about 10 years now, over 7,000 participants and more than 125 speakers. I've been fortunate to be a speaker myself, and I can say that I've had the chance to meet some of the best entrepreneurs, not just in Montreal, but also in North America at Startup Fest. Finally, some great spaces, and these are some of the places that are dedicated to entrepreneurs, but really, as you go around from cafes to, the old Montreal, you'll see everyone is working on new projects, and it's really the energy of the city that will carry you and your project forward. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Ethan. To present now some real-life examples of collaboration between Canadian and Korean stakeholders. So I would like you to welcome Mr. David Mallet, who is a commercial counselor from the Embassy of Canada in Korea.
Good morning, everyone. Bonjour. Annyeonghaseyo. Could I just ask Khadija to put this slide presentation up? Great. Thanks very much, Khadija. Thank you again. I'm David Mallet at the Embassy of Canada in Seoul, Korea. I have a team here of trade commissioners who I work very closely with. If we could just go to the next slide, please. So we work very closely with the provincial offices. We have 4 provincial offices in Korea, in Seoul, Quebec obviously being one of them, but also British Columbia, Alberta, and Ontario. And we work closely with them to fulfill our mandate. And as you can see on the slide, there are 3 main areas that we focus on. For the purposes of this session today, R&D partnerships is obviously one of the key ones. We also promote investment, incoming investment into Canada, and supporting Canadian companies in Korea, exporters. And you can see the areas that we tend to focus on. These are our priority areas for us. You can see ICT, life sciences, manufacturing, clean tech, education, gaming, and a number of others. So we are quite active here. We have about 15 officers working across the trade section and working in these areas. At the end of the presentation, or actually right now, what I'd like to do is just switch the camera here a little bit. Well, actually, I'll wait till the presentation is done because I would like to introduce our Science, Tech, and Innovation Officer, who I work very closely with to fulfill our Science Tech mandate, focusing on the R&D partnerships. Could I go to the next slide, please? So how do we do, in terms of fulfilling the R&D mandate portion, we basically have again, I mentioned we have a dedicated Science, Tech, and Innovation Officer here, Hyunju Lim. And we do this through a number of ways. The most important, I think, is our PDA, what's called a Partner Development Agreement, a Partner Development projects, where basically what we're trying to do is connect Canadian startups, research institutes, or primarily startups, small companies find partners to bring their ideas and their technologies towards commercialization. And so when they see a gap in their efforts, what we try to do is find a focus area. So for instance, we have an upcoming partner development project focused on smart cities. And we have about 10 Canadian companies, including companies from Quebec, who will be participating in that. And our job here is to pair them with Korean counterparts who can basically help them move their projects forward. Another way we do that, apart from the partnership development project or partnership development agreement, is through our Canadian International Innovation Program. And our colleagues from Quebec spoke a bit about this earlier. This is a funding program. It's a collaborative program in cooperation with the National Research Council, the Industrial Research Assistance Program, and the Korean Institute of Advanced Technologies. And it is a funded program, and there are 5 countries which are really the focus of this program, Korea being one of them. We've had a Korea involved since 2017, and through this program, we've managed to fund a number of different projects, and I'll just speak to them, some of these in the next slide, please. Actually, I already talked about this. This was the Smart City Networking Forum. So this is coming up in December. So this is talking about our partnership development agreement. And again, we'll have about 10 companies participating from Canada. We'll be organizing B2B meetings for them. And we'll be focusing on some of the areas that you see on the screen here, smart city infrastructure, logistics, IoT, cybersecurity, and city data management. And next slide, please. So these are just some examples of how we work together, or some of the sort of partnerships through our funding program, which I spoke to earlier, the CIIP. These are some of the partnerships that we've managed to fund. And you'll see a variety. There are government to government, such as the first one, Canadian Space Agency and the Korea Aerospace Research Institute. We also do things like research institutes or university to university in the academia. So University of Waterloo and the Korea Electrotechnology Research Institute, working on a project on manufacturing technology, and then also business to business. So for instance, LG Electronics and Canada's Magna. This is not something where we had a direct role in. It just gives you an example of how we are collaborating in the STI field. But there are a number of other areas too. And again, this is something where we are prepared to assist. And I think that's it. We have one more slide. Just go to that. So that's myself and Kanju Lim, who is our STI officer. I don't know if we can close the slideshow and I can introduce Kanju to everyone so you know who she is. That's it. Bonjour. So thank you very much for giving us the opportunity. I want to thank the organizers at Bonjour, Montreal Startup, and also SquareBridge for giving us the opportunity to speak today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Really interesting. So I would like to now welcome Miss Maria Bilash, who is a program manager at La Piscine, who is a Montreal-based accelerator for creative and cultural startups. So she will also talk to you a little bit about existing collaborations.
Thank you, Alexandra. Good evening, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the presentation. So I will not present La Piscine. I will just add that each year we accelerate around 100 startups in different stages, and around 40 startups going global with the La Piscine. So as for me, I'm in charge of all international programs and of international partnerships. We have started our international development with France. And last year, during the COVID, we have decided to give the opportunity to go in Asia, in the United States, to our companies, because what we have observed that about 30% of our companies target Asia without knowing in which country they would like to go. Often they will say it will be China, but they don't have a clue how to expand in China. And our mission is to show them the best opportunity. So we have learned that South Korean market is very important for cultural and creative industries. And since you have been validated in South Korea, it's easier to expand in other Asian countries. So that's how we approached Andrew Lim. So he was a really great help. Thank you, Andrew, for connecting us with different Korean stakeholders. So that's how we have connected with AI Yangjae Hub, and we have decided to work on AI but creative startups. So startups that use AI in creative fields. We have signed the agreement pretty quickly. So we put less than 6 months since the very first meeting, and we were very happy about this. We have not only we have signed the MOU to exchange two startups, but we have also co-designed the program. So a few words about the program. It's a 10-week program where startup has to validate through 6 weeks of preparation and 2 weeks of business mission, the product market fit. It's a sales-oriented program, and it's very effective. So it has been already tested with other partners. So it's really great program. So where we now onboarded 2 Canadian companies last week, IPTalki and Emav. So they have started to work with AI Yangjae Hub experts. This morning we have onboarded Korean companies in our international cohort, among with Singapore and Jordan companies. So we have 4 foreign companies that work remotely, but they work with our coaches at La Piscine. So they will finish the program in January, and we will be happy to give you the results. What we have observed that during our relationship, the Korean partners were very meticulous. So while signing MOU, they were really meticulous about each point, each word, because we have noticed that they really want to be sure about the commitment that they take, and they want to deliver exactly the thing that we have signed, and that was really appreciated, because we developed a kind of trust between us, even if it has took time. And another thing, what is important, every company that has to go to Asian market, you have to schedule, you have to put more times, because when you try to organize or schedule a meeting, it will take always more time to organize, because there is a lot of time between each answer. So maybe put some automation in scheduling. It will be a good idea. So that is something that I have experienced myself, and this is something that I will try to do better next time. And I will share my contacts with companies that would like to outreach La Piscine, and maybe to be onboarded in our next cohort. I will also share a fun fact. I don't know if you were talking about this, but I don't know if you know that South Korea is a part of OIF. So it's an international organization of la francophonie. Sorry. I will share the short video, 5 minutes. You can see it after the meeting. But so the South Korea is officially part of la francophonie, and it's very odd, but it's interesting to know, since 2016. So that being said, I will, Alexandra, that's all for me. I will share my contacts, so please feel free to ask me, to write me, and connect on LinkedIn. And yeah, have a nice day, have a nice evening. Bye.
Great, thank you very much, Maria. Really interesting. So right now we are running a little behind, so we rearranged a little bit the schedule. We had prepared, actually not we, but somebody had prepared a very interesting video that we'll just share afterwards. So this was prepared from Paul Fournier, who is a Quebec comedian and now a TV personality in Korea. And he has prepared quite an entertaining video, and I'm really sorry we can't take the time right now to share it, but we'll send it to all the participants in a follow-up email. And what is interesting about it is that it's really entertaining and telling you about the cultural differences between the Quebec people and the Korean people. So it's interesting because obviously when you do business, and some of the panelists already talked a little bit about the differences in culture, the hierarchy over in Korea versus here, where it's very different. So I invite you all to watch the video once we shared it with you, so to learn more about the cultural differences. Also, I would like you to please don't refrain from already writing your questions. I know we have the Q&A section in the chat that is already quite active, but please, as we're running behind, if you already know your question, please don't hesitate to write it down, and we'll try to answer it in real time in case we cannot keep the question period per se at the end of the webinar. So with this being said, let's follow up because right now we have our one of our last segments, which presents some real-life collaborations between Montreal and Korean companies. So for the first part of this, I would invite Charles Marsh, who is Chief Commercial Officer at Deeplight, a Montreal-based AI software company. So I have prepared a few questions for you. Good evening, Charles, over on our side. It is the evening. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Alexandra. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, and I'll try and be as funny as Paul. Get a bit of comedy in there as well. So. Don't
worry, I know it's going to be very insightful because we already had a chat, so you don't have to worry about being entertaining. So I'll ask you a couple of questions. So I know that you have had some first experience in South Korea even before joining Deeplight. Which helped you, I believe, better understand how to go about entering this market. So I would like you to please share this experience with us.
Yeah, sure. I'll be happy to. So yeah, it's a pleasure to have this opportunity to talk about my experiences. And yes, I think we've heard a lot this evening already as well from Andrew, Geneviève, also David as well from, both the Quebec government and the Canadian Trade Commission. And, I can speak firsthand that as a sort of an AI startup in Montreal, leveraging that strong network, that connection, within South Korea itself to make friendly intros. If you don't take advantage of that, it's kind of a big waste as a startup, because not only do you have funding programs, but also just the network of contacts. So, that's something I would certainly say is a huge plus for any startup in Canada, quite frankly, but specifically in Quebec to take advantage of. And that's really kind of like a first phase that I experienced. And then a second phase was actually to engage with a local sort of consulting company, something that I'd had experience working with in other countries in APAC as well. It was a company called Intralink. And the advantage of that was that obviously they were based in Seoul. They speak the local language as well as, English, also French as well. But I think, as Maria was saying as well about schedule, the great thing about working with that consulting company was that, every time we did a business trip, they managed the schedule. They managed all of the meetings. They organized it. They organized the transport and, even, some entertainment as well and things like that. So, it was a very productive business trip. Every time we went, it was back-to-back meetings, and everything worked like clockwork. So that was kind of the, the second phase. So both of those, approaches work super well. And I think as a startup, there's nothing better than getting that sort of friendly intro, that friendly connection. And, those two paths I would strongly recommend.
Mm-hmm. Very, very interesting. Yeah. So, and I understand that, it can be quite a challenge to acquire this first contract, and it's quite strategic also, who to target first. Can you give some tips for that?
Yeah, I was smiling earlier because Eric from Samsung said it very well about do's and don'ts. And when he said about proving in your local region, I think that's a fundamental one. So, at Deep Light, we're based out of Montreal. We've taken it upon ourselves to try and connect with companies that are headquartered in Seoul or South Korea, but have offices in Canada or, the US, particularly, of course, Silicon Valley. There's lots of satellite offices out there. So, work locally with those teams, with those offices where it makes sense, and prove your technology or your service out. Of course, leverage the partnerships that I mentioned earlier, but also I think, Eric mentioned this as well, is, if you're looking to raise funds as well, there's nothing better than getting a strategic investment from, one of the J-Bowl companies as well in particular, but, other strategic investments, that really helps. And then something that I've seen work really well is actually engage with other startups in South Korea, and kind of they'll scratch your back and you scratch theirs. So you help them make intros in Canada, for example, and vice versa. So you try and generate business for each other. Of course, you've got to focus on your main core business, but establishing a relationship with startups there and working on a governmental project together that's funded, so that you're not incurring costs. That's also something that works super well. So that's some of the challenges you face, but just to jump in and expect to just sign a contract straight away with executives in these big corporate companies in South Korea, you're running into trouble. So.
It might not happen. Yeah. Great. So I have a final question for you. So how about at Deep Light? Where are you at with developing the Korean market?
Yeah, well, we're at that first stage. So we're working with Andrew and Geneviève and others at the Quebec government office there, which is fantastic. Also, Paul at the Canadian Trade Commission, and obviously the network we have locally here in Montreal to help us. But we've done what I said. We've basically, one of our first customers was actually LG Electronics. And we're working with their AI R&D team out of the US and also out of Toronto. And, we have Samsung here in Montreal that we'd be, very keen to engage with as well. But, we're working on proving ourselves locally in our own market with South Korean companies. And then we'll take it from there. And we have a partnership agreement with Samsung SDS as well. So, and that's based out of the US. So it's kind of following the recipe that I mentioned. And so far so good. We just can't wait to make a trip out there when the time is right. So.
Yeah, and we hope it's going to be right very, very soon for professional and personal reasons. Great. Well, thank you very much, Charles. I wish you all the best for Deep Light and yourself for conquering the Korean market and make fruitful collaborations. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Well, thank you. And again, thanks to everybody, and bonjour Startup Montreal, for hosting this event. And it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Have a good evening. All right. So now let's go to our next speaker, who is Mr. Edward Shim, who is the managing director at Studio One Labs, who is a Canadian-based IT company. And Edward is currently in Korea with the K-Grand Startup Challenge program that we've heard before. So Can you? Yes, perfect. There you are. So I hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Alexandra, and thank you very much to Bonjour Montreal Startup for facilitating this meeting. So good morning for those in Korea and good evening to those everyone west of our time zone. My name is Edward Shim, Managing Director of Studio One Labs, where we are actually the creators of electronic fabrics. So to give you an idea of what exactly electronic fabrics are, let's see, are you able to see the screen with two pictures or video side by side?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, so when we talk about the evolution of electronics, they're used to normal hard metals, which has been improved towards plastic and printed electronics, which is what you see on the left side. Now, the challenge with that is whether it's pressing or bending, a computer cannot differentiate the two. So now Studio One Labs is building smarter hardware, intelligent hardware where it can differentiate the two. So even when it's folding, it can still function. And it's a very mature industry with textiles, especially with the strength in Montreal, also in the textile industry, to start turning a lot of these fabric and these mills and these looms into production facilities for fabric electronics. These are some of the projects we've done in Canada, working with the fabrics, because you can imagine where can it go? It's essentially everything where fabric touches, we can turn that into a smart connected device. We're here on the K-Startup program because the interest was more towards the Korea's automotive industry and the ongoing disruption in the supply chain. Currently, the capability of your seat to monitor a person being there just to turn on an airbag, we're able to monitor a bit more information than that, which we've also done clinical studies for. And this is essentially the difference, that as soon as a person is sitting on there bending, the computer only determined that a person is there. So our intelligent technology is able to do a little bit more, such as monitoring vital signs. Now, here's an example when my dog had lung cancer. Unfortunately, I was using the device that he was laying on to monitor his health. And as you can see, this is all real-time information of his breathing pattern, that it starts becoming irregular, primarily because of the disruption and the abnormalities in his breathing. So imagine before COVID, if we were able to determine in real time when someone's struggling to breathe, how much more support it would have been for the healthcare institutions. We're supported primarily by the ecosystem in Canada. These are our partners and our collaborators that we work with, including the funding agencies, industry partners, and academic collaborations. Canada is strong with R&D funding and research and development support. We're backed by a lot of strong computing resources, which is why a lot of global companies look towards it for the artificial intelligence to be able to build these types of models. And it's very open to the innovation culture, which shows why our company was able to succeed so much. So I wanted to acknowledge, especially to IBM, when they started an innovation program where we end up leveraging a lot of resources, and to my mentor, Marcus Van Kempen, who supported me on a global stage to be able to understand thinking with a global perspective. We've gotten over 1.5 million US in funding and resources to support all our projects that help the development of our company. And for SOSIP for being our greatest supporter that support us with the computing infrastructure so we can build various models. And to Right Out in Navy, to be our lead for our patents, where 5 out of 5 countries, we got them all granted in less than 4 years, I think it was. I also want to show that based on the global relationships we've made through the various partners and support from government agencies, we were able to set up a Taiwan supply chain. And this was done within 2 months, especially during COVID, where we had a successful use case where we were able to take part of our technology and provide it to what was needed in various countries to facilitate the shortage in personal protective equipment. I'll get to that in a little bit, but my goals in Korea right now is to set up a Korean company, and I've been here for about a month now, and we're looking for partners to be able to help support it so we can localize the supply chain and bring it here to Korea. And that way we can do the integration and roll out the technology. Now, part of our use case that goes back to Taiwan, our success case, is that we started off with initially a $50,000 seed investment. And last year from COVID, just a part of what is made up in our technology, which is essentially all fabrics, we netted about 9 million US in sales, just in the one component of it. But if we take that fabric and put it into electronic components, especially to address the supply chain, the potential of that sales is amplified. So my goal here in Korea is to be able to connect health and mobility in developing smart seats, which this concept also awarded us the Innovation Award through Audi. So one of the things to address as well is currently the cost has gone up 10 to 20% for these parts. And for those companies, if you haven't experienced that increase, you will. So that's why I suggest that we're looking for partners here to see how we can roll out our technology and localize the supply chain here in Korea. Thank you very much, everyone. My contact information is here. I'm here until December in the short term and hoping to extend that stay further. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Edward. Really interesting. I didn't know all of that, what you could do with the fabric. So very, very exciting. I believe that you asked quite a few questions that have been answered all the while. But now would be a good time, if there is still open questions, to write them down for you. We have a couple of minutes maybe before our final segment. In the meantime, and before also introducing our last speaker for the closing remarks, before that, I really have to thank the different partner organization that made this event possible. So starting with the Shinhan Financial Group, the Quebec Ministry of Economy and Innovation, the Quebec government in Seoul, who has been extremely helpful. So all of those really made this first collaboration between Bonjour Startup Montreal and the Shinhan Square Bridge possible. So thanks to all of you. I also wish to thank the City of Montreal for their continuing support of our organization. So I would like to now welcome for the closing remarks Ms. Geneviève Roland, which we've seen on a screen a little earlier, who is the director of the Quebec Government Office in Seoul.
Thank you. Bonjour à tous. Annyeonghaseyo. I'm really happy to be here with you making the closing remarks. I won't take too much of the time, but I think it's important to thank the organizer and the speakers today. We really did get a lot of useful, relevant information, so thank you. Special Gamsahamnida to Consul General Kim in Montreal, with whom I had the chance to meet prior to his departure to Montreal. He just arrived in Quebec, but already is really involved in the Montreal business community and really dynamic. So thank you, Consul General. I also would like to congratulate Bonjour Startup and Shinhan Square Bridge for their collaboration. It's a really good example of cooperation between Quebec and Korea. And Quebec office is happy to support, and we will continue to do so. This year, it's the 30th anniversary of Quebec government presence in South Korea. We 30 years working with our partner, including, of course, the Canadian Embassy, working on, yes, developing trade and investment, but also promoting culture and innovation. With the Canada-Korea trade agreement, with its strong innovation ecosystem and with its influence, both in terms of technology and culture in the whole region, South Korea is, of course, an important strategic partner for Quebec. We will continue to increase our presence, our footprint in South Korea. Quebec will soon launch its Indo-Pacific strategy. We will also increase our people, our resources in South Korea, so more support for you. Also more people working on some initiatives, like, for example, the Trans-Pacific approach that we're developing together with our colleagues in other Quebec offices and together with our Délégation Générale in California. So the aim of this approach is, among other objectives, to support Quebec companies, Quebec startups, to meet with potential Korean and other Asian partners, VCs that are based in Silicon Valley mostly. So there is a lot of support, a lot of initiative. Charles mentioned it before. So to the Quebec company, I would say, contact us. Contactez-nous, contactez Andrew, nos collègues ici à l'ambassade, à Montréal. Il y a tout un écosystème pour vous aider, donc profitez-en. To the Korean startup, I would say simply Wanyong Hapnida. Au nom du gouvernement du Québec, bienvenue. And thank you. Merci beaucoup, Yansa Hamnida.
Thank you very much, Geneviève. Thank you very much for those closing remarks. And we made a little decision for those, as now I think the question period, we did it really on the chat time. And as we still have 9 minutes, so what I suggest to all of us, if you still have 15 minutes, we'll share the video with you now that I referred to a little earlier. So it could be really an entertaining way to end this session for those who want to keep on, but we'll share it also with the participants who want to leave now. But it's really very entertaining. So we'll just broadcast it right now. And I thank you all for being here today. And I hope you enjoyed the session. There was a lot of information shared, and we hope it gave you some interest for both Montreal, Quebec, and Korean and Seoul's market. So with that being said, we'll now share the video of Paul Fournier on the cultural differences, and I wish you a very pleasant day in Korea and a lovely end of the evening in Montreal. Thank you very much.
Hello? Oh yeah, it's on. All right. Well, gotta look professional for these things, right? The startup world is no joke. 안녕하세요, 여러분. 제 이름은 Paul Fournier예요. 반갑습니다. Hi, everyone. My name is Paul Alexander Fournier. I'm 38 years old. I live in Korea. I've been married for 3 years. No kids yet. And my salary highly fluctuates. How's everybody doing? Sorry I couldn't make it live. You know, these TV gigs, you know how they work. They decide to reschedule all the time. So you never know what's going to happen. But I don't know if you've noticed a little detail in my intro was that I gave my full name, my age, forgot to give my address. I'm sorry, but I live in Ilsan, which is just north of Seoul. And what else? I'm married, been 3 years, no kids yet. And you know, sometimes people get curious, they want to know the salary. Now, that's something that's kind of crazy in Montreal. Asking someone their age, their marital status is kind of intense. But if ever you do business in Korea, wait a minute, I got glasses on. Much better, more handsome. Let's say, for example, if you're going to do business in Korea, you're going to have to get used to that question because everybody is going to ask you your age, where you're from, what's up, why are your eyes blue, all the time, just because that's the way the system works in Korea. And what I mean by that is that age is very, very important. And why is it important? Because it's part of the whole respect hierarchy system that's present and very deeply important in Korean culture. It all started, I'm not going to give a history lesson, I'm not a history buff, but thanks to the Chinese philosopher Confucius, he was a jolly old fellow that lived 2,500 years ago, and he was a deep thinker, and he had a lot of thoughts about hierarchy and how to respect people and the relationship between you know, your superior and the junior and between men and women, and that has a massive influence in Korean culture even today. And we're going to talk about that a bit later. I worked as the CPA for about almost 10 years, a CPA accountant. So I was doing auditing, taxes, and after a bunch of years and doing 10,000 hours of Excel and being a god at Excel, I decided to be a freelancer for mostly startups for a few years. I think the most notable startup that I helped out was Rise Kombucha. Those guys are kind of famous in the startup world in Montreal. Cool guys. Helped fix up their accounting system for a while. And then, you know, at some point I wanted to head for new challenges. So I came all the way to Korea. Now it's been 5 years that I'm in Korea. And in Korea, I've interacted with some startups, but I mostly work in the TV world. I mostly do comedy. Trying to do comedy. It's kind of hard to do stand-up in the Corona world, you know. It's like illegal to do shows almost. But yeah, and I do a bunch of TV nowadays. First, the Korean perspective. What if you're a Korean that comes and wants to work in Quebec, in Montreal? How is that gonna happen? What does that mean for you? 한국인 시각으로 어떻게 될까요? 캐나다에 가시면. You know, in the world of startups, especially in startups in Montreal, we're always trying to be like really flat in the hierarchy, right? It's like, hey, you know, you're my boss, but we're buddies, right? We could maybe go for a drink. We could, you know, address each other in a not so polite language and I have to freak out too much. I could be independent. And even in, let's say, in French, in Quebec, the way we handle politeness is mostly through the use of how we address the word you. So, for example, vous means is like a polite way of saying you, and tu is the just like, you know, impolite way of saying you, for example. And that's pretty much the, you know, how much the extent that the French language changes for politeness. However, so how we handle politeness in Montreal is we're gonna speak perhaps more slowly, you know, bit perhaps in a more humble manner, and especially the sentences will be longer with more, you know, question marks, you know, or perhaps, you know, loose ends. For example, let's say, is it okay if perhaps maybe one day we schedule a meeting on your convenience? Yeah, very polite, right? In general, we do hope for being flat. So, you know, if, you know, you could, you know, the open door philosophy, talking with your boss freely, those kind of things. And also, especially in startup environments, we try to flatten the hierarchy so that younger people, juniors, they're not scared of proposing good ideas that might be good for the business. Yeah. And in general, you know, in Montreal, when you meet people for the first time, it's going to be, perhaps it's an East Coast thing. You might have noticed it in New York as well, but we're kind of like super right away. We're like, hey, salut mon chan, what's up, bro? Hey, we're bros, we just met, bros for life. You know, it's a bit like that. So it might be surprising for some Koreans at how when they come to Montreal and try to meet people that we're so friendly right off the bat. But in actuality, becoming real friends takes years and years. But the initial connection will be quite friendly. Now, for business, in private life and business in Montreal, usually the way it functions is your private life is extremely private unless I decide to share it to you. So, for example, I had coworkers that I worked with for years, and I didn't even know if they were married, dating someone. You know, I didn't even know if they liked sports or if they went to the gym. Not that it's illegal to ask these questions, but you have to kind of feel it. You know, in Korean, they'll say like nunchi. You gotta nunchi that, you know, and figure out if it's okay to ask a question or something like that. And another thing is when you want to organize, you know, like 5 à 7, you know, when you want to go for drinks in Korean, a hueshik with the coworkers after work, that is usually really hard to organize in Montreal. I remember one time, actually this was at Rise Kombucha. We scheduled it almost 2 months ahead of time just to have some drinks on a Thursday after work. You know, in Korea, that's like unheard of. So if you're a Korean that's doing business in Montreal, don't be too surprised if you don't know much about your coworkers or the people you're interacting with. It's really normal. Usually they try to just keep it professional. And even for drinks, I mean, if you're visiting from out of town, they'll try to make time to meet you or do something. But in general, Montrealers, we usually just go out, if we go out on Fridays and Saturdays. Usually Sunday to Thursday is kind of a dead zone and we just stay in our house. By the way, if you hear some bird sounds in the background, it's because I've got a crazy bird in the house. All right, so now that we've covered a little bit from the perspective of a Korean that's coming to Montreal to try to do business on you know, when they interact with people, now it's time to cover what happens if you're somebody from Quebec and you're coming to Seoul, Korea, that crazy city. Now, first of all, first thing you have to remember, just in general, Seoul is 10 times whatever the size of Montreal. You know, if we include le bon vieux 450, the 450 region of Seoul, we're talking about 25 million people. It's insane, literally insane. And because it's such a mega city, there's some things that you have to remember about just human interactions. That's anywhere in the world when it's a mega city. Usually, like, you'll see and meet tons of people all the time interacting. Sometimes the streets are so full, people will bump into you. That's normal. Don't take it personal. And also, just because like there's so many people, it's very, very easy to, you know, meet someone and just forget about them, you know, or cut contact with them. It's not that, you know, the people in, let's say, Seoul are bad people. Just that's what happens when you're in a mega city. I've learned to do it too. I meet too many people, so it's too hard to just keep up with the connections with everybody, right? Now, earlier we talked about a little bit of the hierarchy, the politeness system, the language in Korean. Let's go a little bit more in detail with that. So what that means is that I think the easiest and simplest way to talk about it for, let's say, somebody from Montreal is you have to imagine that it's a little bit as if the army is present in all aspects of life. So in the army, if you got, you know, somebody that's outranking you, you know, you can't just speak to them at any time. You have to listen to their orders. You have to do what they want. You know, you have to respect them. There's like a whole code and set of behaviors behind the whole ranking system in the army, and it's essential if you want to function. And that's kind of how it works in Korean. So the Korean language is very complex, very advanced. They have several forms of politeness. For example, the way you talk with casual friends, the way you talk to people that, you know, you're on good terms, but, you know, you got to still respect. Perhaps they're older than you. Perhaps they're like a manager. They're in a position above you. So you have to talk to them in a more polite fashion. And also with people that, you know, perhaps even more professional context, perhaps army context, whatever context. Sometimes there's another language where it's like very formal, polite, also a bit distance. So you kind of, just by the way the person is talking to you, you know that that person is kind of like not going to be a friend of mine, you know, for now. So, you know, pretty much right away when they greet people, they'll bow. And how deeply you bow depends on the ranking of the person. And this whole kind of ranking system is based on a combination of factors. Could be age, could be as the person, the boss. Is it the daughter or the son of the boss? You know, there's all sorts of, is that person rich? I mean, you know, if you're rich, you know, you'll probably be more polite, you know. Yeah, there's so many factors that go into it. And it's so complicated that even for Koreans, it's kind of difficult to determine. So as a safe baseline, they'll always speak politely to each other. And then they will ask permission to, hey, is it okay if I talk, you know, casual with you? Can I talk casually with you, right? Normally, if you're older person or higher outranked person, it's kind of weird to say, but I don't know how else to say it. Then you could speak kind of impolitely or more casually to people that are younger than you. For example, if you're a professor and you're teaching students, the students, you could talk to them in a more casual manner. It's okay. Well, of course, always depends on the context, always case by case, right? Everything. Oh, hello. Speaking of the bird, you see, this bird, very young, just a few months old, supposed to respect me, but she doesn't respect me at all. She's always doing whatever she wants, and she's always pooping on my shoulder, driving me crazy. Anyway, say hi to the camera. I did jiu-jitsu for a while in Korea, and I would see situations sometimes where you have like an older man, perhaps in his 40s, starting out jiu-jitsu, and, you know, the teacher or, you know, like the other students are higher belt than him, of course, because, you know, he's a white belt. So in that case, he has to, even though he's way older than them, perhaps by 15 years, he has to respect them because of their position in the hierarchy in that context, right? So even context to context, the way you're going to speak, the hierarchy is different. So this system of hierarchy in Korean culture is so strong that even in the startup environment in Korea, what a lot of startups started doing is they will give, let's say, Western names to each other, right? So for example, perhaps my name is like Mark, normally my name is Jinu, but call me Mark, and while we work, this is Sally, Marina, Bob, whatever names they pick, right? So the reason they do this is so that, because normally in Korean culture, when you work in a professional environment, you're always calling people by their position. See how important rank is? You're always calling them by their position. So you're like, oh, Manager Paul, or, President Sally, or whatever, right? So you're always giving titles to people. It's super natural in Korean culture, right? Even I do it all the time. When I work in TV, I'm always calling people by their rank, director, or the production designer, or whatever their title is. The editor. I'm always calling them by their position, right? Also helps out because when you don't remember their names, if you just remember their rank, it helps to try to encourage that innovation, to make it more comfortable to work in the business, and try to, because when you're a startup, you're not too many workers, right? So you want the input from everybody. However, what ends up happening after a few months is that people will start calling each other Manager Bob, or team leader, Bill, or whatever. So even with the Western names, so they'll use the Western names with the position. So what all this means, if ever you come and work in Korea, is first of all, like, the politeness, crazy important. Always bear in mind, even if you're from abroad or whatever, you always have to remember what your position is. So for example, if I'm a low-level manager, but I'm working with a higher level, like a higher level manager, or the president of our Korean company is giving his or her time to work with me, I have to remember this person is above me. Perhaps for the contract, for the deal, you people will be the same level-ish, but you always have to remember if that person is higher level, that person is higher level. So that means with interacting with people too, with emails and stuff like that, you have to match, if as much as you can, the hierarchy, the decision-making levels. For random junior, messages like president of a company, it's kind of like awkward. Doesn't seem serious for that interaction and that dealing. So that's something to remember. But in general, as long as you stay polite, because you're a foreigner, especially if you're just visiting, and you stay polite and nice in general, I mean, there's not going to be any problems or something like that. It's more if you're really serious about living in Korea, then you got to learn all that stuff. And it's very, very basic. It's something you'll learn right away when you go to a restaurant, the way you drink, the way, the ordered people drink. You can't just drink alcohol on your own. You have to wait until somebody higher than you pours the drink to you, and then they give the cue to cheers and drink and all that stuff. That's the way it works, and it works really well. I mean, Koreans, they are awesome for innovation, the top of their game. They do things fast. They build buildings in 2 seconds. It's mind-boggling. It's incredible. And perhaps it's because of that hierarchy system, because when your boss tells you work until midnight tonight and you do it, well, I guess more work gets done. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great conference and have fun, and maybe you'll see me around on TV. All right, see you guys. And girls.
So that was the video. I'm happy for those that could make it to stay until the end. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoyed our evening, our morning with the people from Seoul, people from Montreal, and from Quebec. And I wish you a very pleasant day and night. Thank you very much. Au revoir.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Au revoir.